Well, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley announced that the issue of decriminalizing marijuana is not a priority for government at this time. He was speaking at a post-cabinet briefing and referring to an agreement at the 39th Heads of Government Conference in Montego Bay, where a consensus was reached by CARICOM members to review marijuana as a Schedule 1 drug. The Prime Minister also announced that government will not be running any advocacy for decriminalization. And joining us via Skype, an advocate, Marcus Ramkisoon. He's joining us to share his thoughts on this. Good morning, Mr. Ramkisoon. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. Thanks for having me this morning.
It's a pleasure having you on this morning. My first question to you, how do you respond to the Prime Minister's statement that the issue of decriminalization of marijuana is not a priority at this time?
Well, as a government body, of course, they have, our local government has a lot of issues to deal with: crime, education, health, and so forth. But the CARICOM group, or the CARICOM governing body, has convened a commission to deal with the issue of marijuana 4 years ago. And even we in the community had hoped that they would have made their decisions or their recommendations rather a few weeks, few months, a year into it, but they did take 4 years. They did proper research into the Caribbean community and how marijuana works in the Caribbean community, how it is used culturally, how it is used medicinally, and they've compiled their report finally, and they've released their report at the 39th Heads of Government meetings in Jamaica last week or the week before. That report basically states that they are now recommending that the Caribbean islands or all members of the CARICOM community should go recreational when it comes to marijuana, because they've seen both the medicinal benefits and the economic benefits of cannabis use or licensing of cannabis within the Caribbean communities. So if they've done their research and it's taken them 4 years, it's not a run-of-the-mill momentary decision, then our government should at least listen and realize that it has become an issue. It is one of the important issues that's taking place within the Caribbean, a hot issue, if you will. And they should at least start the discussion rather than pass it off completely.
Well, the Prime Minister, in his response, spoke about scientific evidence, and there are discussions, as you mentioned, of marijuana as an economic entity and it being a harmless substance. But the question remains, has science really been able to confirm that?
Of course, we have, there are tons of accredited scientific studies that show beyond the shadow of a doubt where marijuana is good for a number of medicinal ailments. There have been 2 drugs that have been approved, one in Canada called Sativex by GW Pharmaceuticals, and that's usually used as an oral spray for multiple sclerosis, for pain, for a number of other ailments. And just last week, the US FDA approved the first natural cannabis drug, which is Epidiolex, by the same company GW Pharmaceuticals, and that's used for epilepsy and seizures. So, I mean, if the FDA can realize the benefit of marijuana as a medicine, finally, and they have 90 days to change their federal decision on marijuana, then why can't our government start recognizing the benefits of it on the whole? Now, what I have to say is, in a government office, we have a minister. We don't expect our ministers to know everything about everything, right? But they have advisors, they have secretaries within their office. If there's a topic that they may not know a lot about, it is the job of the advisors and the secretaries to do proper research into that topic and present a summary report to the ministers, right? That has not been done in our government yet. That should be taking place. So at least, as I said before, the discussion should be started at an official level.
Now, marijuana usage and licensing in Jamaica, for instance, is controlled by the Cannabis Licensing Authority. Do you propose a similar body in terms of regulation? How do we manage its usage in the event that it is, in fact, decriminalized?
Now, I have proposed a system of regulations for medical marijuana to both the last government and this government. And this government has accepted it through the Ministry of Health 2 years ago. The Policy Office of Ministry of Health has vetted it and acknowledged it and accepted it and said that when the government is ready to change the law, they will go with that system of regulations. That system of regulations also recommends something of a licensing authority. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but I spent the entire year of 2015 in Jamaica assisting the government there through a company with the forming of their regulations. And I can tell you that their regulations were based on my proposed regulations, which were approved by our government. So it's basically the same thing. They just sort of shortened it and did a little bit of shorthand. But what we're recommending is the same thing, something of an authority or board that needs to be convened, just like our alcohol board and so, to be able to grant licenses, to be able to vet approvals and all these things, make sure and do background checks and all this, and grant licenses for both cultivation, for dispensing, and for infused products. And the proposition that we made has everything within it. It has all administrative effects, all penalties, all everything according to rule of law. So it was a complete system of regulations that, according to our law in Trinidad, all our Minister of Health has to do is approve those regulations and put it in place, because Trinidad, unlike the rest of the Caribbean islands, already has medicinal law. We already can be prescribed marijuana by a doctor or physician, and we already can possess it legally, like myself. And the only problem that we have is we have nowhere to dispense it yet. The pharmacies are not aware of the law, so no one carries it.
You mentioned your efforts and the proposition that you would have made. What other efforts have been made thus far by those in favor of decriminalization? And I understand that a petition has also been signed, correct?
There's been a petition out by, I think, Ms. Muller on change.org for a long time now. But, I mean, being realistic, I have my own political party in Trinidad, Trinidad Humanity Campaign, and I can tell you that a petition is not enough for our government. Our people actually need to stand up and stand in front of the Red House if there's anything to change the minds of our government, or at least a lot of public surveys like you guys in the news need to do more surveys regularly to prove to our government that this is a topic that our people want to see changed, want to see some change regarding this topic. So, I mean, we have it all. We have it all in front of the government. The government has it all before them, basically. So it's now up to them to make a decision and not just change the law, but again, at least start the discussion at an official level.
I know you touched on it when we spoke a little bit about the scientific evidence, but for those listening and viewing, why should this be a priority? What are some of the advantages of decriminalization?
Medicinally or economically?
Both.
Well, medicinally, first of all, cannabis has been shown to be very good in treatment of and a curative agent for a number of diseases. Multiple sclerosis is a disease that I don't want to go too much into the details medicinally, but in layman's terms, basically, it puts you down terribly, and it deals with your brain cells and your neurons and so forth. And marijuana is actually the only drug that, when I say drug, I don't mean dangerous drug, the only pharmaceutical drug, if you will, that's known to remyelinate those neurons, recoat it, and bring the person back into proper health. So that's just one example. It's used for asthma, it's used for pain, it's used for epilepsy. There's something called Dravet syndrome, which is a case of severe epilepsy where the person who has it undergoes sometimes up to 300 seizures a month, which is 10 seizures a day, and these are grand mal seizures, so these are heavy seizures. I've actually met some persons in Trinidad that have approached me to give them information about oil. I, of course, can't dispense oil, but I do direct them to the internet where they can learn to make it, and they get it done. They ask people in Trinidad supplying oil. And they have kids that have Dravet syndrome. And I mean, there's a 6-year-old girl, I can't say who, of course, but there's a young 6-year-old girl that goes to school, for lack of a better word, high, because she is on the oil, she's medicated, and she's doing perfectly well in school. She's been through kindergarten like this. She's up to standard. I forget what standard she's in now, but she's on the medication. She has less than 1 seizure a day. So in other words, sometimes no seizures for the week, right? And it's working. So there are a number of people in Trinidad and Tobago that use it medicinally already. So we need to bring this on to a regulated level where these people can access it for themselves, for their children, to bring our system up to a better health standard. Because the goal of the government should be and is to make sure that the citizens of the country are in proper health, both physically, mentally, and socially. Now, economically, we've seen examples within the U.S. with regulated markets. We've seen Colorado, we've seen California, we've even seen Uruguay, we've seen places in Spain. Right now, just to give you a look about, I am in Amsterdam. We're at Voyager's coffee shop. And just to give you an example how things go, I'm not really supposed to be filming this, but you know, people go up, they come in, once they're over 18, they go to the counter, they purchase their marijuana, and they can sit down and they can smoke right here, or they can smoke right around the coffee shop. And look, No one around is bothered. There are kids around, there are people around with you know, I don't know if you can see it in their background, but there are kids around, there are people walking with their strollers and also, and it's not bothering them. It does not change society in the least. It does not have any effect on, or negative effect on society. It actually passes off as anything normal. Economically, we've seen that that these countries that have regulated have brought in mass amounts of of profits from taxation to their governments and towards their communities. Colorado, for one instance, has taken the taxes from marijuana and put it specifically towards schools and education buildings and so forth. And they've amassed over $300 million in taxes in 1 year. Sure, they have a larger population than us, but from what we've deduced from the seizure rates of marijuana in Trinidad, right? How much stuff doesn't come in, but how much stuff is seized by the police. And then we've estimated how much stuff actually gets in. I can tell you that marijuana is a $1 billion industry in Trinidad and Tobago alone. And from the taxation schedules that we have proposed to the government, we can easily see they can bring in 200 to 300 million TT dollars in taxes yearly from regulating this market. So there's economic benefit, there's health benefit, there's social benefit in terms of when we were on the radio, we heard a lot of people calling in and say, look, when we finish work, we go and we have a smoke just to relax. Not medicinal, right? Not economical, but just to take the stress off and take the edge off as opposed to drinking alcohol. A number of people have said they drank alcohol and it affects them negatively. They're angry, they quarrel with their wives and their kids at home. Marijuana doesn't do these things, you know, so it's not a dangerous drug as it's been purported to be for a number of reasons for a number of years. It's not that. Our government needs to step up in time and realize that we're not a backward community, we're not a backward island. We don't have to wait till the rest of the world does it before we can look at it, right? We have things in place. The CARICOM community has researched it. They've made their recommendations for recreational. It is now time that our government, as Trinidad and Tobago, come on, man, we're supposed to be the leaders in the Caribbean community. We have oil, we are a rich country, and we're industrial leaders within the CARICOM community. We let Jamaica start with their law first. St. Vincent has already proposed to their parliament, and Antigua is already proposing. I actually may get a chance to propose to Antigua's cabinet in the next few weeks to help them with their regulations also. So why is Trinidad staying behind? Why should we let everyone else do it? Right? This is, if it's being demanded by the people, and it seems to be an issue throughout the Caribbean community, a government that represents its people should at least start an official discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Marcus Ramkisoon, for taking the time to chat with us and also giving us that mini tour of Amsterdam.
A little mini tour of Amsterdam, yes.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome. We've been chatting with advocate there, Marcus Ramkisoon. Well, we now take you to our local weather forecast.